Paradaya is a Persian walled space. It's a Zoroastrian term from like 10,000 years ago. And if paradise is an architectural term, then we have this opportunity to present something that is a kind of architectural choir. I've always worked at the intersection of architecture and sound. I've always felt like it's an inevitable part of making sound, that our sounds exist within spaces. I created a work for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art called A Paradise Choir. We tried to use music to look at a building. I realized it was really very simple to create a choir. You needed a set of ropes and something to do together. At the end of the month, there's this collection of performances that can be articulated all at once throughout the museum. Members of the same choir are singing gentle, soft, droney tones to Agnes Martin. Members of the same choir are banging on a giant I-beam to try to determine the vertical nature of the acoustics in a space. Members of the same choir are singing Carnatic music in a soft structure. Members of the same choir are playing on Pythagorean tune chimes in a white box. Members of the same choir are playing music around a Richard Serra. And members of the same choir are just like looking at paintings and like listening and hanging out and wearing robes. So 200 people in the museum are in the choir, and they all have different functions and interests. I'm really interested in taking what is a rarefied practice of mindful listening or of experimental sound making and inviting in everyday people who maybe have never engaged with that practice before to have an experience, to ask them to give over some of themselves into a group. You could then participate in workshops or through these 45-minute intensive experiences in experimental vocal music for large groups of people. I like to create arrays in the work because they offer many different ways of interacting with the piece. We typically think of a choir as being made up of singers, but really the true components of the choir much more involve listening, stretching, rehearsing, doing everything else but singing. Maybe 95% of the choir is made up of listening, and then 5% is singing. I wanted to partition it off and say, your job today is to listen. You are a choir of listeners. Your job is to be singers. It's like really silly to do that, but that kind of silliness points to how impossible it is to turn off our willingness to communicate. Listening is a practice, and I think one of the interesting things about a Paradise Choir is that we've essentially invited people into part of this practice. We've introduced people to a way of thinking that in such a visual environment is a little dissident, more focused on the ears, more focused on the body. A Paradise Choir is a beginning more than an ending. But the thing that's been valuable about this work to me has been the kind of many different versions of paradise that I've been told about now from the public. So maybe paradise is something we make. And I think just that idea alone, that paradise isn't an inevitable next plane, paradise isn't a kind of pre-existing state, but is something that's made in real time and space, is a beautiful idea.